chances are pretty good you have an Express Employment Professionals franchise near your home or work. With more than 900 offices in several countries, it's hard to miss this ubiquitous Oklahoma-based business that's placed well over 8 million people in temporary or flex jobs. Bill Stoller, the company's co-founder, chairman, and CEO, knows what it takes to find, acquire, and keep a job. Or if you're hiring, how to test out talent for fit and competency while satisfying any current budget constraints. Here is the man for the jobs. And my guest today is Bill Stoller, the founder and chairman and CEO of a very successful company, Express Employment Professionals, based in Oklahoma City, but with offices all over the country. In fact, international now. We'll talk about that. So Bill, welcome to Game Face Execs.
Thanks, Rob. It's great to be with you. We had
Good to see you again,
we had a
Bill.
long absence in between our communication, but I really thank you for reconnecting.
Well, you know what? I've always admired and appreciated your business. And frankly, I've been a little envious of how you have grown this business since 1983. I know you've been in the business even longer than that when we talk about temporary staffing, but let's modernize it a little bit as we get into our discussion here. You and I are talking in a very unprecedented time economically. And it's certainly different than 1983 or back even in the 70s when you got into this industry. And you have been known to call this primary flexible employment, this type of industry that you're in. And I just want to ask you just straight away, what's it like being in the employment industry when so many people are unemployed?
Well, during this time, it's really it's always been a curse and a blessing anytime you have a downturn and there's high unemployment. But this downturn has been totally different. Usually there's kind of a ramp down to the point where you bottom out, where it took about 2 weeks for everything to bottom out during this time. So as we slowly come out of it, we are experiencing certainly high unemployment, but we're also experiencing a huge shortage of people to fill orders. We have 24,000 jobs that are unfilled because we can't find the people to fill them right now. So it's almost like it was prior when we also had a very difficult time recruiting. And you know, I'm sure some people are afraid to go back to work, and I'm sure the unemployment benefits have been really good. And but I also think that people just are taking a pause. And don't get me wrong, there are still lots of people that want to go to work, and we are putting more and more people back to work every week. But it's still a struggle because there is a demand for people to come fill jobs.
Well, you mentioned a couple of things there. You talked about concern for health and safety. You talked about unemployment benefits may be difficult to, turn away from if they're available to you when you're not employed. Are there any other factors that you can think of right now that cause people to, as you say, take a pause or rethink where they want to go in the workplace?
Well, I also think that the whole issue about George Floyd has changed a lot of attitudes and perspectives. And I think Black Lives Matters. I think a lot of people are focusing there. And again, I think it's a diverse group of people that are focusing on it. So I do believe that has a lot to do with it. But other than what I have already explained, I don't think there's too many other reasons other than people are nesting. They're getting used to staying in their homes. Although, from that standpoint, there's a lot of issues about mental health during these times as well. People being locked up in their homes. But that's why I think we're seeing a second reoccurrence of the COVID. Because people are wanting to get out and they are getting out today. So it's going to be just natural, I think, for that second wave to be with us. And I think it'll just go like waves do. You know, you're going to have a wave here, then a wave's going to come a couple minutes later, and another couple minutes, meaning a couple weeks, and just depending on the timing of what's going on around the world.
Well, you know, when we were thinking about who could be a very interesting, compelling, and helpful guest for our podcast, your name came up very quickly because of the state of affairs that we're in right now as a country, and even, you know, throughout the world. So employment is such a hot topic, and you described just very quickly why it is so. And you're the expert in employment. As I say, you've been in this industry, what, 40 years or so?
Yeah, 40
And
plus.
yeah, so whenever I have employment questions, I think of Bill Stoller. And so let's go back, though. Before we talk about the future, let's talk a little bit about the past. As I mentioned, you began the company with two partners in 1983. One of those partners, Bob Funk, is still with you as a partner, a co-founder. He's the president of Express, whereas you're the CEO. You've seen so much change in how industry looks at temporary staffing. So can you describe kind of the evolution of that industry?
Sure, be happy to. Well, you know, the whole industry started because there were longshore people that had work in the north during the summer, and then they would shift and work in the south in the winter. And so they literally had a job broker manage that for the shipping companies. And then World War II came around, and you had people who obviously went off to war, and you had to have jobs filled, and obviously many of the women here filled those jobs. And then following World War II, you had just a huge surge in the economy, and so you needed to have people, and sometimes those surges were temporary. So companies just decided to start doing just in time. And I think that has been one of the big revelations that leadership and executives have found, that, you know, rather than employ somebody for 12 months a year, we can employ for 6 months. But that's also changed as well, where in the late 80s, because we really got into it in the early 80s, but towards the late 80s, things really turned around to the standpoint of where most of the lower skilled positions, middle to lower skilled, companies really wanted to try somebody out before they committed to them. And so I believe that that has grown just dramatically over time. And you can call that probationary hiring, probationary staffing on our end, where you get to, you know, see how the person works and see what their attitude is and see if they fit your culture. And so that has been a huge reason why the industry has come around. You know, globalization of international companies, you know, the markets have, you know, when the Berlin Wall fell, to me, it just seemed like all the trading that went around in the world, it was just one big trading partner, as opposed to, you know, just producing goods and services for your own country. And that then has caused shifts in demand. So a lot of seasonality. And so seasonality has also created a big need for temporary staffing. And even today, during these times, companies are still needing that, but they truly, many of them are looking at just bringing people in and trying them out before they hire. But let me shift a little bit into the higher skilled positions. When you look at projects that companies need to have done, and the IT world, the technology world, there they have just projects. Maybe they're just now coming up with some software for their company, and so they're going to hire project people. And the IT world, the technology people actually really enjoy that, because most of them do work virtually, and they're able to do their job from anywhere. So the computer age has really brought on a lot into the technology sector as well. So you're seeing it really in all aspects. Engineering can be the same way. When you have construction sites, you have needs for engineers for just a temporary period of time. So there's been a huge mind shift in corporate America and small business. So we've been the beneficiaries of all of that change.
I would imagine also this shift towards telecommuting or virtual work, like we're doing right now, is also contributing to the realization that, you know what, I don't necessarily have to have a full-time employee, or I don't necessarily have to have a full-time job with one employer. I can mix it up. I can shop my services, right?
Exactly, and that certainly is happening. And of course, millennials really like that. They're used to that. They've certainly grown up with electronics and handheld, as well as computers, and they love it. So yes, and just a quick story for us is we used to not allow our temporary associates to work virtually, and that was primarily for worker comp reasons. But we've obviously changed, and we now have figured out how to deal with it and how to work with it. So we have, I can't say a large amount, but we do have some that have worked virtually.
And the other thing that strikes me about what you're saying is that the old traditional, perception of temp workers, and I know that's almost a disparaging term, so please forgive me, but I'm hearkening back to traditional terms. It's kind of like, well, I need someone to sit at the front desk for me, right? I need my assistant is on vacation or sick for 2 weeks, so I need someone. It covers the gamut, doesn't it, as far as the type of temporary associates that a company may hire for all sorts of skill set.
Oh, it sure does. But it's changing. Let me first go back to how to call somebody who's doing flexible work. I don't know, about 20 years ago, we decided let's update that and maybe give them a better title. And so we call our temporaries associates. And we really like that name, and we have never heard anything negative about it. So internally, we call ourselves teammates. And so that's how we identify us versus our associates. So,
and it seems that the model has not benefited the employer more than the employee, or the employee more than the employer. It seems like both sides of the coin are benefiting from this evolution of this industry.
Now, that's a very good point, because there are some people, and quite a few people, in fact, that do want to control their time, and they don't have to work full time. But there's also people that are waiting maybe to go to college in the fall, and they just want summertime work. And some people may be going in the military, 6 months from now, and they need something to do to wait out that period. And then there's also the person that's coming back to work, and before they really want to commit to any one company, they like to go around to various companies and look for the right company to work for. So it benefits both sides, because they both get to see how each other acts and works, and what the culture is, both within the company and what the person's beliefs and culture are.
I appreciate all the clarification you're bringing to this conversation already, Bill, because here's another, I think, misconception, and maybe it's my shallowness, but historically, I may have thought that someone who turns to a temporary agency for assistance in finding work is someone who might be a little desperate, that they can't find anything full time. So I need to find a broker, if you will, of jobs who can help me. But the way you're describing it, it makes it sound as though, if you're an available talent, an available associate, you could actually use Express as a great way to strategically map out your career.
Exactly.
Kind of the ebbs and flows of your life and important milestones of your life, whether you're having a child or whether you need to care for a relative, whether you want to get additional education. So am I reading this correctly?
You're absolutely right. And it's just that flexibility that affords both the company and the individual. And I think a lot of it is individuals are really looking at their lives and their balance of life, and they're wanting to enjoy both. But there's other times too, such as if one family member gets a job in another community, and so the trailing spouse um, needs to find a job. And when they do that, we're a great source for them to utilize to again to look what the market is. And just think about when you move to another city, period. So many people don't buy a home, they just rent for a year, so they can see what part of town that they'd like to live in. And really looking for a job is very similar to that.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about the assistance that Express Employment Professionals gives people who are in any of those kinds of situations. So, as we're recording this, you are approaching 900 offices throughout North America, now in Australia, in South Africa. So, truly a global company. But I also want to, if you'll forgive me, I want to read a couple of things I think the listener and the viewer needs to know about your business. So in 2016, I'm just picking some random dates here, but in 2016, just 4 years ago, Express was named one of Forbes' best franchises to buy. So you are a franchise model. Those 860 some odd offices. Be interesting to know how many of those are owned by franchisees and how many of those are still owned by corporate. But also more recently, Forbes has ranked you the number 5 best temp staffing agency and the number 11 best professional recruiting firm. And then another one that I find very interesting is that Entrepreneur Magazine ranked you number 1 in your category for franchisors. So tremendous successes, and obviously industry thinks very highly of the model that you've built. So I've got to ask you, Mr. Co-founder, how did this all come about? What's the secret sauce that has made your company so successful over these decades?
Well, you brought it up early in your question, and that is we're a franchised organization. And for the type of business that we have, which is very personal, it's very relationship based, and there's nothing better than to have an owner of a business in their local market. And I think that is the number one reason why we have been able to grow as much as we have, and quite frankly, been as successful as we've had. I will also say this, that the founders are also franchisees. Um, and so we treat our offices, which we started that way. When we all three got together, we had disproportionate amount of business, and so the only way that we could really start a business was to charge ourselves for how many paychecks that we provided to people. So if somebody had 250, they'd pay a portion to get those paychecks to the associate. And if somebody had 100, then they would pay for that service. So that's how we accumulated money, other than lending the company money at the very beginning. And then we started franchising and getting people, and then obviously we had to get a line of credit. So that's how we ended up growing. But I also think that we have a unique purpose, and every one of our franchisees who captures the passion, and they capture a passion for doing our business because they also understand what the purpose is. And our purpose is really to help people find work and companies to find good people. So that to me is the backbone of who our company is. And I think people that are passionate about what work they do are really passionate because they do have a purpose. And I just don't think you can become passionate unless you have that true purpose behind you. I personally found out, it took me a couple years when I was placing people on jobs, because in my day, temporary help was not a very big business, even though there were companies that specialized in it, but it was those that placed people on jobs full time. And so the very first time that I put somebody on a job, it sure made me feel good. And then after a while, I just found out, is this what I want to do for my life? Is continue to place people in jobs. And then I rationalized in my own mind that what more important thing to do than to help people find a job? Because what can you do without a job? There's not much you can do. So I rationalized that the job I was doing was the most important job that someone could ever do. And I think we have a lot of franchisees and a lot of their staff that believe the same way. So that has really been, I think, the cornerstone, along with being 100% franchised.
You talk about a job and how good it feels to place someone. I know a little bit about that, Bill, just a little bit. For over a decade, my business was actually in the training/placement business, where
Mhm.
we put people into jobs within our core industry at that time, which was the sports industry. We still work a lot in the sports industry, as you know, but we also work with more general businesses in a variety of industries. But nothing brought us more satisfaction than to take someone who was unable to get their foot in the door, either because they didn't have the requisite skills or they didn't have the quote connections. And we would take them and train them up, and then we would give them that opportunity with our network of clients. And our placement rate was 75, 80% at some point. And we used to think that's a lot better than most colleges, not to diss most colleges, but we understand what you're saying, and it's so gratifying. Um, what is the most important job someone can have when they're out of work? What's the most important thing they can do when they're out of work?
Well, I think they need to start looking for a job, because it's not always easy and it's not always quick. And quite frankly, I always recommend coming to Express and earning extra money, and look at companies that you might want to work for. So the advice that I've always given somebody, especially coming out of school, I say, don't jump at just the first thing that you would think is a good job. Find a company that is a good company to work for. It doesn't really matter what job you do. It's finding the company, because once you get inside of an organization, your talents and skills will be seen by others, and then you will quickly get promoted or put into maybe more interesting work. So I just think it's very important for someone to when they're out of work is to try to continue working on temporary assignments, and then look at the same time, and then find a company that you really want to work for.
So can I drill down into that a little bit with you? When you say find the company that you really want to work for, most companies, kind of like most resumes, look perfect on paper, right? I
Right.
mean, I've said before, the closest we ever get to perfection is on our resume. Um, not, and I think there's certainly, you're supposed to put together a very attractive, appealing resume, but that interview is so important to really identify who this person is beyond what they've written. And when I look at a company, I can go on their website, but they look pretty good on the website too. Are there any insights, any tips, or any secrets even that you can give us? How do you really get to know a company when you're on the outside?
Well, work temporary for them through Express. Um, well, I think you got to get references, and I think you need to find people who have worked there, and why they're not working there now. And I think you need to find out from people that are working there now. I mean, anybody could go out at 5 o'clock, and as people leave their um, place of business, they could always ask them that way. Now, I've never heard somebody doing that, but I just think that's about the best way that I know of. And then you can also talk to their competition and see what their competition thinks of that organization.
Hmm.
So there's ways to always look at and discover what a company does. But today, there's there seems to be rankings for everything and ratings for everything, and so I think people could look up what ratings are. I know in our industry, every town has ratings of the best employment companies to work with.
That's a really good point. Even where I live, I'm happy to tell you that where I'm living right now, there's an express office about 6 miles from me. In fact, I'll bet many of our listeners who may be listening to this in their car, chances are that not very far from where they're driving right now, there's an express office. There may even be one that they've passed already. Um, so let me ask you though, those candidates that are going into the express office and they're sitting down with one of your advisors, what are some of the skills that they probably should have, or at least work to acquire if they're going to be a really successful candidate?
Well, I have to say that soft skills are still the most important skills to have.
Hmm.
You've got to develop yourself. You've got to be knowledgeable. So you need to, you know, make sure your mind is healthy. You need to have the right attitude, and attitude is really, to me, everything. Um, and I think you also need to have a good appearance. Um, and it's those sorts of things that are very, very important. Now, in terms of what type of true skills somebody wants, they're going to have to find out what they like. So if they took some college, did they like accounting, or did they like presentations, or speech, or did they like English? Because there's always jobs that you can do in those areas, and obviously some just want to be a mechanic. Some want to be a skilled laborer, which, quite frankly, is a wonderful position to be. We, in fact, about a year or two ago, we actually took a survey of trade people, and they seem to be the most happiest workers that you could find. We found it was just about 90% enjoyed what they were doing and felt that they were a great contributor to their company, and they came home satisfied after a day's work. So you just have to find out where your interests are, and then go out and get some skills in those areas, and then you're prepared to go into the workforce. But I'll always come back to attitude, and how you look at life, and how positive you are, is the most important thing.
Um, do people in this environment, I say this environment meaning the economy we're in right now, there's a lot of social unrest, there's political uncertainty. Um, should people be faking optimism? You're a wise individual. You have kids and grandkids. What are you telling them right now so that they can have a good attitude about the future?
Well, I think a lot of people are really distant from what is going on. Now, when it comes to um, diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think a lot more people are tuned in, and I believe our youth don't have any feelings, negative feelings whatsoever. They've grown up in a much more diverse um, life than what you and I've had, uh, but it's just all about treating everybody fairly, equally, uh, and quite frankly positively. So I haven't personally seen too much of negative attitudes, other than I hear a little bit more fear in people because of the COVID-19. But other than that, and it's maybe just who I work with. I mean, I work with a bunch of great, positive people and who are just wanting to do what's best for everybody. But I will tell you that I'm a big supporter of DEI. I have several initiatives that are going on inside our organization. We had an ad hoc committee that we turned into a full-time committee, and we're going to get our franchisees involved in focus groups and in a franchise committee to give us advice, and we're going to do all we can to make sure we recruit and for diversity, and I just think that's just the healthy way of doing things. And I think it's like most executives, they don't want Me Too people, meaning they act like me. They want people who challenge them, and I know I do. I'm not right in everything that I do. So you want people that have diverse ideas and thoughts and so forth. So that's just my take on where people are today.
It sounds like you're undergoing right now even greater communication within your organization to understand one another. You've talked to me in the past about communication and how important you believe that is for any professional in any skill or trade or industry that they may find themselves. Can you share with the audience a little bit about your views on communication? And oh, by the way, you've also told me in the past that you think that relates very closely to what I'm a champion of in the industry and the skill that I work in, and that being sales. But I don't want to give too much away. So what are your thoughts on communication, Bill, as a professional?
Well, I don't think there's anything more than an executive needs to do is communicate to their people. You know, I've certainly learned during this time that the more they hear from me, the better off it is for everybody. And they want to hear what we're doing, why we're doing it, etc. I remember I did live streaming with our people for a couple of years, and I did it about every quarter, and then we did it up to six times a year. But I have done probably nearly 20 of them since March 19th. On March 19th, I gave a live stream to all of our people, and just to let them know what we're doing, because we literally had to go remote. And so ever since then, we have been communicating. I've always had an open door policy. I think I want people to come and talk to me. We have quarterly meetings with all of our staff at headquarters, and we have a ritual at the end of each meeting. We have for the previous 2 weeks, we have asked the founders questions, and so people ask us questions, and believe me, they challenge us in many areas, and quite frankly, some great ideas have come from those questions that we were able to implement. So it's not only you communicating, but it's also you listening in these times and all the time. And I think that's extremely important. I truly believe that people who are the ones that ask the questions are the ones that are going to really get ahead in life as well. And I know from your standpoint, consultative selling is extremely important. And to me, consultative selling is asking questions and listening to what the person's saying.
You know, Express is a company a lot of people love working for. Your headquarters in Oklahoma City. As we've already mentioned, you have offices everywhere. Your revenue growth, last I checked a couple of years ago, it was about $3.75 billion in sales. I don't know what it's at today, but obviously continues to show very impressively. On the other hand, there are a lot of people that don't like where they work, and they, there's several studies that have been done, and even polls and surveys that suggest what those reasons might be. In fact, a recent Harris poll suggested that the number one reason why people leave is because they have a better offer. But I've also heard competing polls say, and I think you and I have chatted about this in the past, that the reason why people leave is because they don't like their boss. So what are some, if you're advising a company on how to retain good talent, what are some of the things that you could suggest that would make that talent want to stay and want to be a part and grow with that company?
Well, I think there's quite a few things you can do, but obviously the first thing is you've got to communicate and you've got to listen to those people that are coming in. I also think it's really important that you have internal training for your people, and it's been about over a year now, so it's been probably more like 15, 16 months. We've actually developed a leadership program for our people, and it's all by volunteer if they want to do it. And so, but we have a program that they're able to actually more self-develop and then also learn leadership skills. One thing that we've instituted is we've actually have our own in-house Toastmasters club. And I don't know if they're doing it in these times, but I wouldn't doubt if they're doing it virtually. And if they're not, I'm going to suggest that make sure that they do, because I think that's something that will keep people positive.
Well, but can I just interrupt you there, Bill, and ask you, Toastmasters, for those who may not be aware, it's been around for decades, nationally and in individual chapters all over the world. But Toastmasters teaches people how to speak comfortably in front of an audience, whether it's a speech or it's a Q&A. Why did Toastmasters become something that was instituted at Express, and why do you think that's continuously an important skill for people to learn?
I'll go back to my experience. When I joined the company right out of college, it was Acme Personnel Service. They had in their manual that if you want to help yourself, here are certain things you can do. The one I remember the most was join a Toastmasters group and just become a better communicator and to break down any fear you might have speaking in front of other people. So I did. I joined Toastmasters, and I've actually over my life have gone through 2 Toastmasters chapters, and I'm sure some of your audience knows, some don't, but they have manuals that you develop speeches from. And I actually went through in both clubs. I went through both of those, and so I just you have a goal in front of you, and they place it there, and so that's why that's really how I got involved. But it's all part of self-development, and I think that's one of the things that people really need to do for themselves, is to constantly self-develop. I remember many of the books that I used to read when I was in grade school and high school and college were self-development books. I truly enjoyed reading those, because I don't think there's anything more important than you yourself being happy who you are. And it's your self-esteem and your ability to really please yourself allows you to help other people, because I don't think you can help other people if you're not happy in your own body. So and I think that's why I enjoy helping people and helping people find work, or giving people opportunity to own their own business, because it just gives me joy, because that's how I have lived my life, and I just love to see other people be able to experience the same thing. One of the things that I am really big about is having a decision made at the lowest level possible. We had an instance where we had a franchisee who supposedly owed $250 for something, and they were adamant they didn't, and our employee was adamant that they did, because that's what the records show. And so our CFO came to me and he said, well, what do you want to do with this? And I said, how much wasted time are we going to have arguing over $250? That doesn't matter. Let that person make that decision and say that the franchisee is right, and let's just go on to the next thing. So it's part of that empowerment that I think is very important. And we've all heard of some of the hospitality organizations around the world who give their people the power to make decisions like that. But I just think that makes it much more important, and to be able to have those decisions made at the lowest level possible, so everyone can be positive and go on to the next thing. So I think just giving people responsibility is extremely important. Giving somebody the opportunity to lead a project. And I knew I grew up that way because I grew up on a farm, and my father put me in charge of certain projects and certain things. And boy, I learned to be a decision maker, and learned to be independent, and have some autonomy, and him not over my shoulder all the time. And so I just think that's very, very important as well. But I think everybody sets an example for somebody. And I believe that everybody is a mentor to somebody, to everybody, quite frankly, because no matter where you are, people look at you. And if you're the center of attention in one way, shape, or form, boy, they're looking at you and studying you. So I think you always have to just believe that somebody is constantly monitoring who you are. And I think within an organization, I think that employee needs to take that responsibility on as well. So it certainly does come back to self-discipline, and I think that's another big trait that people need to have. So again, I think an organization needs to be able to offer an expression of how people want to work and take on responsibility and be responsible. So that's how I think organizations can do a better job.
Bill, I want to stay on this track of maybe where we can all make improvements. Let's start with the candidate who's interviewing for a job. I think you've placed, 8 million people in jobs?
Over the lifespan of our company, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's an incredible number.
It's almost $500,000. It's about $500,000 a year now.
Oh, wow. So you don't know about every one of those cases. I know you can't keep track of all of them, but is there a common mistake that people interviewing for a job typically make that you wish you could correct before they even make that mistake?
Well, you're talking about the interviewee.
Yes.
Well, sure. There's certain things, they just need to be prepared. It'd be nice to know if they know anything about the company before they come in. It'd be nice if they knew anything about their boss. And today, on whether it's Facebook or LinkedIn, you can find out a lot of things about people. And a lot of people do that, and I've been impressed with what they've done, at least the people that I have come into touch with. But then they have to ask the right questions, and the right questions is not necessarily what kind of benefits do you have for me? What can you do for me? For the most part, you need to have a balanced interview, and I think you need to come up with a couple, 3 questions to really ask the interviewer to when you are preparing. But your attitude also comes out, and I think you've got to display that positive attitude and a go-to attitude, and somebody willing to go to work. So I think that interviewing and looking for a job is the toughest job there is. But you talked about it earlier about communication. When we talked about sales, I think everybody's a salesperson, because just going through a job interview to me is you're selling yourself. And so you need to know who you are, and you need to know what your positive traits are and what your negative traits are, and don't be afraid to communicate those. And so it's all part about selling yourself to the company.
So let's switch seats now. What's the biggest mistake you see hiring managers, the interviewer, will make that may sabotage their ability to get a really good candidate who's sitting across the desk from them right now?
Well, once again, I don't think if they're not prepared, then that's not going to be good. And I think they also have to sell themselves and sell the company to the person. So it's really a two-way street from that standpoint. I think they need to ask intelligent questions. I think that they also then need to listen. I've always liked using open-ended questions and letting the person speak for a minute or two instead of just yes and no answers. And I do know that there are times, and I can be at fault at this too, is too many times you want to answer the question for them, and sometimes you do. And so you just have to be patient and let the person explain where they're coming from. And sometimes, you know, the first impression is typically the lasting impression. And I've told many interviewers in the past, I say, you know, the same amount of time to each interview, because first impression may not be the right impression. So I really said, if you're going to take 45 minutes for the interview, give everybody that 45 minutes, because you will discover more as time goes on. And I have found this out, that, you know, sometimes a person's very quiet when they start an interview, and then when you get warmed up, then they really are much more expressive. And if you didn't give it that time for them to warm up, they never would have happened. So just making the person comfortable, I think, is the most important thing as well. And obviously, if you can do it between two chairs, you know, that's also the best way to do it. So there isn't that barrier between you and they. And you know, intimidation can be a big thing in an interview, and you don't want to intimidate the person that you're interviewing. So I think those are just a few of the areas that I think a person interviewing someone else can do better at.
So you're really suggesting that the interviewer has to remember that they're recruiting somebody. And you were a collegiate basketball player. That's why we provided a little bit of basketball behind me today, you know, paying homage to your collegiate career, Bill.
Division III, so.
But still, aren't you in the Hall of Fame of that university?
Well, I am in a couple.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, that's absolutely true. And you're also a great contributor to Pacific University. Let's just call it what it is. So I know you're a huge supporter and contributor to that university even today. But
I'll also say this: I went to a junior college first, and it was Lower Columbia College in Longview, Washington. But I also think that's a great way to go for people, because I did it for my basketball career, because I didn't want to commit to a 4-year school. But going through junior college was one of the best things I did, and that's the one I'll refer to. I'm in the Hall of Fame there, and I was blessed and honored to be admitted in the Hall of Fame.
But they recruited you, and they do today. That's what universities and their athletic programs are so well known for, is the recruitment of athletes. And it's funny that sometimes in business, we don't really take that same attitude. We almost take the attitude of, you're lucky I'm interviewing you today. And I am blessing you with my presence, allowing you into my conference room or my office. That's the kind of the vibe they give to a candidate. And granted, they're in a position of power, and they're in a position where they're already successful. They have the job they want, and this person doesn't. So it's easy to kind of act a little bit full of yourself and a little more superior. But I think what you're describing is you have to put that person at ease, and you need to let them know that we want you. We want the best candidate, and we hope that you're that person.
Mhm. Exactly.
So,
Well said.
well, now I want to also ask you, because you mentioned earlier you have helped people who want to become business owners. As a franchisor, you have many franchisees, and so you have made people's dreams come true, who can invest in an express franchise, and now they're a business owner. But not everybody's cut out for that. Not everyone's cut out to be a business owner or to be a franchisee, whether it's an Express or McDonald's or Taco Bell or whatever a situation may be. So, what advice do you give to people who are contemplating making such a career move? What are some traps they need to avoid? And also perhaps what are some highs that maybe they cannot yet see but that are out there for them if they're successful?
Wow, that's not only a loaded question, but we could spend a day on
I'm
this one
sure.
alone.
I'm sure.
Um, well, you know, I had no intention myself of starting my own business, but it was just the downfall of the company that I was working with when they ran into financial trouble. So sometimes what's adversity to somebody else and even yourself, changes your whole life. And so you decided, did I want to start my own business or did I want to continue with the company because I was going to buy the office? And so I decided to buy the office, and then 3 months later they went under, if you will, from a bankruptcy. So I think you got to go back into your childhood and your growing up period. Did you like being a leader? Were you a leader? And if you were a leader, that's one indication. Did you like taking risks and doing things on a job that was somewhat risk taking? Now, I don't mean physical risk, but I mean decision making risk on what direction to go with a decision and then a program. Um, I also think that if you're relatively independent and you have worked autonomously, again, I think my father was the best person for me in teaching me at a very young age. I mentioned it earlier that he'd give me responsibility, and then I went out and did it. Um, Another, I think, important trait is, are you proactive? Are you always looking for something to do that's better? Or are you looking for another way of, of tackling something? And then, of course, there also becomes financial things that are involved. Uh, I think you got to be a wise spender, and you've got to save and for the rainy day, but you also got to save if you want to buy a business. Um, and I just think there's all sorts of things that you've learned about yourself, um, and we're not perfect. We select people that aren't right for our business, and we select people that uh, they just aren't able to do the types of things that a business owner must do. Time management is very important. Are you a good time manager? Do you prioritize well? Um, but one of the things that I would also suggest is that there are business brokers out there, and I think business brokers can be a big help to you when if you're thinking about getting into a franchise or buying a business or whatever it might be. But you're right. Not everybody's cut out to be, and for the most part, I think those that work for real large organizations that have a very um, broad job that doesn't really give them a definite skill. I'm not certain if that's the right person. Sometimes being too corporate, sometimes not being the doer, especially in our business. I think we're not an absentee owner business. You've got to be in there every day, and you've got to when you get started, you've got to actually do the work itself. You have to be in the business, and then once you grow enough and you have enough business, then you really manage the business and you're on the business instead of directly in it. And that's when you become a sales leader. And I think that's extremely important as well. And you've got to enjoy managing people, and you've got to enjoy inspiring people. So if you like doing those things, then owning an Express franchise or even a McDonald's franchise is the right way to go.
So let me ask you, as you know, Bill, this podcast is built around the idea that we like to talk to people who know how to persuade, who know how to influence and inspire people, and or who have been persuaded and influenced and inspired to do good in business, in their communities. I'm wondering, in your career, is there an individual or is there an incident that stands out where someone inspired you, where someone really motivated you to take a particular measure or a step, take a risk perhaps? And I'll even give you this, Bill. I'm sure that you're involved in that every day with your leadership team, with your franchisees. Just in general, how do those words resonate with you? To persuade, influence, and inspire.
Well, I mean, I think that's what leadership is all about. I think those three words are what every leader should consider and understand as they lead their organization. I do think that it's just important for people to understand that you just can't be afraid to do what you might want to do. Um, and I think if you really look back at a lot of experiences in your life or people that have influenced you, I think you take snippets of each one of those. When I first interviewed to go to work for Acme, that was the last thing I never thought about going to work for an employment agency. And I had just taken a personnel class in college, and they forewarned you about going through an employment agency. At least the book did, and the professor. And so I was really hesitant. But when I interviewed with my eventual supervisor, he gave me a vision, an opportunity, and I really think that's really important. Is people need to have that vision put out there in front of them. Certainly the president of that company was an inspiring person. He was very persuading, but in a great way. And you just have to treat people the way you want to be treated. And when I looked at him, he's the one that said, you want to join Toastmasters, and if you want to do secondary education, get an MBA or whatever. And so, when somebody says those things, I went out and did them. And so I went out and got my MBA. It was just that vision that people put forth for you. So I think there's all sorts of people that persuade you, but you have to accept what they're trying to message to you. And so I think it's the receiver is the one that needs to take action to themselves. So, but without mentors, without people that that give you some direction, why why continue? And you might as well just take people's advice and what you think you can do within it, and I think you'll make a success of yourself.
I love that answer. And I want to ask you one more question, if we could, before we wrap up. You're in the job world. Your whole career has been built around helping people find work and sustaining themselves and their families. And I just want to ask you, what's the value of a job in your view to an individual? What does a job mean to somebody? And what does it mean when someone doesn't have a job?
Wow. This is another one of my topics I love. To me, a job is everything. If you go through and I don't know all all of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but self-actualization is one of them. And, it gives you self-worth, a job, and everything to me relates to the job. And you need to have that. Security is another one. Love and security, you've got to have those. And I think a job allows you to have that. And I've always loved work, and probably to a fault at times, but when you do what you're passionate about, it's absolutely not work. And in some ways, when you're in the sales business, it's also competitive. And that's why I think having competitive background has certainly helped me, as well as yourself. And it's just so important. So, like I said earlier, if you can't be happy with yourself, you can't help other people. And so I think a job is everything. What can you do without a job? I just totally believe that being happy on a job is makes you happy everywhere. And you just have to find that, and you got to find out what you're passionate about, and then go out and do it. Doesn't mean that you can't change every 5 years, because of whatever circumstances. But I've interviewed once for a job, and that's all I've ever done in my life. And I've just never had to go elsewhere to find a living. I certainly have, from a business standpoint, started other businesses, and still have other things going on at the present time. But it's all being with people, working with people, helping people, and seeing how people grow and seeing people develop. That's got to be a huge motivator in somebody's life, and it's been a big one in mine. And I'm just very happy that I've had that opportunity, and I expect to have many, many, many more years of having those opportunities.
It would benefit all of us if you did, Bill. So keep at it. I just want to say one thing about your comment, if I may, and that is, we have some people listening or watching that don't have a job where they actually punch in, punch out, get a paycheck every 2 weeks, but they have a responsibility, right? It could be for, as I mentioned earlier, caring for a sick relative or raising a family. And so would you agree with me that having a job really means having a responsibility?
Absolutely. I actually think one of the better jobs in the world is raising a family. I truly believe those that have devoted their lives to doing that are the most successful people in the world. I rank them higher than anybody in my mind. And people that really help other people, no matter what they do, is extremely important. But yes, I absolutely totally agree with you.
That's awesome. Well, Bill, this has been a great hour. Thank you for sharing with us about Express and what's made it so successful, and then also your personal thoughts, and, as I said earlier, your tidbits of wisdom, which have been built up over decades of leadership and success. So this has been very interesting and fulfilling for me. I'm sure for our audience as well. And we at GameFace just wish you and Express and your 860 plus stores or offices around the world, your associates, your franchisees, your leadership team, we wish them all continued success.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for being a part of this episode of GameFace Execs. If you found any of it useful or helpful, please rate or like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. I always appreciate you referring us to others as well. I'll see you next week. Until then, persuade, influence, inspire.